Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Coach podcast. This week, for the first time in absolutely ages, we have a coaching session. So in this episode, I'm talking to a final year PhD student, Swagata, who is struggling with overwhelm and with kind of the relentlessness of having this large chunk of work to do before she hands in. We recorded this back in November and I'm scheduling it now for you to listen to over the New Year period. This is going to be perfect if you ever feel like your work is endless, like you desperately need a plan, but you don't have time to stop and do it, or if you find yourself being more self-critical than you'd like. So, in short, all of us. Hope you enjoy. Let me know what you think. And if you ever want to be coached on a future episode, do get in touch. You can contact me through my website or by pressing the Ask Vicky a Question button on your podcast, and we can get you booked in. It would be fun to chat.
I actually need help at this moment is really to change this mindset to keep pushing in the last few months. And there are like a lot of blocks and overthinking of what is preventing me to do that. So I want to focus mainly on that. And I understand there are external factors, there are things that have happened, but really what would really help me in these last 4 or 5 months that I have to really have the motivation to keep going, because it's also a tiring process, but really to get out of this almost a dread of going to do the PhD because of all of these things and the overwhelm. And I want to focus mainly on those things.
Perfect. So you use the word dread there. Tell me more about this dread.
Yeah, it's so when I started, it's 4 years ago, a little over 4 years, because I extended a little bit. It's my own project. It was not like a project that I applied to. So I made up the proposal. I applied for the funding. So it was all hard in the beginning, but I did it because I really wanted to do a PhD on this topic. So I had to manage everything by myself because I wasn't part of a PhD team. It was my project that I brought to the supervisor. I applied for funding, of course, with the help of everyone. So I really started with a lot of enthusiasm, and it was also validated because of I got a good funding. So it meant that other people thought it was, the university thought it was worthwhile. And also throughout the PhD, it seemed like it was going quite well because I was doing well. I don't know what that meant to the PhD, but of course, like I was, whatever deadlines there were, whatever presentations, I was very, let's say, intuitive to what was needed in the presentation. And so in my head, I had the impression that it was going okay. But now that I'm trying to end it, there is a lot of pressure because it's kind of ending something that I made up and I was trying to prove. So I had to end in this spectacular way because I brought it. No one else told me to do it. And like constantly working continuously for 4 years, I'm tired. I am also overwhelmed with, I think, the scale. And I think the scale of the PhD is something I'm realizing now that I have to finish, because earlier I always had to make a presentation for a specific part. So let's say a 20-minute presentation or like a progress meeting. So you always have a little bit focus, or so I can leave out other things and really prepare it. But now everything has to make sense. Everything that I did has to come in it, and I have to link it properly so that the scale of the whole manuscript is, like making me a lot overwhelmed. And because I think of the way I was working, I'm also constantly tired. So my brain, let's say, is not at the best, where I really needed to be at this sharpest, because now I need to critically make these links and come up with these arguments and also make my own position more clear, which is something I'm really struggling with. So there is this constant dread of doing something that is not good enough. So over the last, let's say, 1 year of the PhD, I have been working, but there have been these difficult decisions I have to make, and I kind of have been procrastinating. So I leave them, and then now I have to deal with all of them together because I have to make it.
Okay.
So that becomes very difficult for me. And now it's becoming like this dread to go back to the table to work, because I feel like these old habits that I want to procrastinate and do something easy, but I do have to do the hard things. And I really then hate the feeling that I'm not enjoying the PhD, or so it's like this constant thing. I know that I'm dreading it, but then I'm like, oh my God, but I did this. So in my head, there is another voice that's saying that I enjoyed it. I used to enjoy it. I should enjoy it. This is like the final thing that's coming out of this 4-year thing. So there is this negative thing, which I'm also judging myself for dreading it. So it's like this continuous loop happening, and which I'm really, really struggling at this point.
Yeah, I think there's going to be so many people listening to this who empathize with that completely. And especially this idea that we're kind of not showing up exactly how we want to. And then we're judging ourselves for that. And then we know we shouldn't be judging ourselves. So we judge ourselves for judging ourselves. And it all becomes this big like Inception type situation where it's just a lot of thoughts and a lot of drama for sure. So I want to get clear on some of the facts. So one of the things that often happens, especially at this stage of a PhD, but to be honest, at any time in academia, is people can get very caught up in their own story. And you've got this big story around, there's a lot of it, it's a big scale, it's got to connect, it's got to be spectacular, it's got to prove all of these things. There's a whole lot of stuff, and I'm not being disrespectful when I say story. Anything like that that's not just factually true is story. And what can be really useful is just to sort of separate that out a little bit before we start dealing with it. So my first question for you is, where exactly are you at in the write-up process? So where are you at with data collection? Where are you at with analysis? Where are you at with your chapters?
So at this point, I have kind of written a draft of all my chapters. So I'm doing a more qualitative research.
Okay.
So I don't have experiments, but then I do have field visits and stuff. So all of those things are done. So I just have to write everything. And I have written like first drafts. I just have to write my conclusion chapter. And but as of this week, I just need to revise them. And I have received comments which are helpful, but they also need major revisions. So that would also mean that I would have to do a lot of these, like the basic, what you call experiments, not really experiments, but I have to rethink them, how they fit. So I have to make a little bit changes in my basic analysis thing. So they need major revisions, but it's also at this point that I don't want to keep doing it again and again. That's what has been happening. I want to do a good draft and be done with it because this is also the time. Because I have been writing for a long time, but it was really like unfocused. And I was really like more describing things, but not critically making links. And so now I really want to do one version and okay, that's it.
It's really interesting, this notion of not wanting to do things again and again.
Yeah.
So what is wrong with doing things again and again?
Because I feel like I'm okay with doing things again and again. And the way in our discipline, it is actually helpful to keep drawing and redrawing things. But what I mean by doing it again and again, and what I have an issue now, is the way I have been doing it, I wasn't clear on what I wanted to say. And that's why whenever I was writing or doing something like in the chapter, I was getting lost in details. And then I find that I can't get back to the main thing I was saying. And because I wasn't getting like clear in the beginning, that's why I had to redo things again and again. And it wasn't in a very like in one direction. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. Let me do this. And then you spend your time doing these different things, and you have work, you have experiments in these things, but at the end, you have to, of course, leave something out to make the bigger story. So redoing in the sense I meant like I didn't know in my head, or I didn't make the decision what to keep, what not to keep. So that means maybe I also redid a lot of things that over 2-3 times I went back to the first thing. because I hadn't thought it through, and I was constantly in this rush to get done, and I'm half tired, but still pushing myself. So that was something I really need to be able to make decisions so that I'm like, okay, so I'm clear with the things that I'm doing.
Yeah. Because I think the reason I ask about this is people often talk about how they want to be more efficient. They want to not be kind of going down dead ends, going around in circles, and they want to feel that they're moving, like you say, in a linear way towards the conclusion. And I think it's really important for us to separate out a normal research process from something that's driven by unhelpful levels of self-doubt.
Yeah.
Because I think there's some bits that you've picked out that are super, super useful. So recognizing that sometimes you maybe rushed because you wanted to get it done, or you kind of questioned your right to assert a point or whatever, that whole imposter syndrome thing. And so you ended up second guessing things that you could have just stuck with. I think that is absolutely worth us thinking about, and thinking about how we can make sure you can not necessarily avoid, but minimize that stuff at the moment. But I want us to think about the normal research process and whether you think it's reasonable for the normal research process to go in this straight line.
No, absolutely.
Because I think there are things you're beating yourself up for in the past that sound to me like entirely normal deviations that happen as you learn.
Yeah, I think like I have kind of accepted that it's not a straight process. So I feel like the acceptance is also two levels for me. So overall, I have accepted that the research takes time, and like that it's also an iterative process. And every time I do it like there is something else that I figure out. So I do accept that thing. But I feel like when I'm doing it in the process, so when I'm planning it, I do understand it. I understand everything that I heard, I read to help the PhD. But I feel when I'm in the middle of it, like really implementing it, when I'm writing the chapter, this overwhelm takes over. And somehow, even though I know that it has to go this way, and there is this overarching thought that I understand, at the moment, like this day to day, it's really becomes overwhelming. And that's where, even though I remember it, it becomes difficult to connect to it. And then I think it's also this habit of just pushing myself. So this way of working that I have developed over years. So at that moment, it becomes like, even though I know it, even though I remind myself, then it becomes this thing, come on, it shouldn't take so much time. Huh? Come on, so I look at the plan. Okay, it's not so much. Huh? Come on, why are you overthinking it? Just do it. So I feel like a disconnect between these two kind of acceptance, where over the long term, I can even accept that I am taking time to extend it, and I know the reason. But when I'm actually working on it, it feels like a waste of time to slow down and connect back to these bigger reasons why I actually convinced myself that I should slow down, make it a more like a understanding plan of myself. So that's something I'm still figuring out how to do it.
And those of you watching on YouTube will see me smiling, because this is just so, so common, so normal. Okay. And we can do stuff about this. It's brilliant. I want you to notice that you were talking about one of the things you wanted to avoid doing is rushing to conclusions without thinking it through fully. But what you're doing at the moment is telling yourself you have to go straight to the conclusion because you don't have time to go around all the wiggly roads. And so we have to try and be cautious of this bit where we're actually telling ourselves to do the thing that we're also beating ourselves up for having done in the past, right? And I think the only thing that's happening here is totally, totally normal to cognitively understand that something's meant to be difficult, that something's meant to be iterative or whatever. and at the same time to not want to do it that way and to think you need to do it another way. That's completely normal. And the bit that people struggle with, the reason this kind of crashes in your head and feels like there's a problem, is because we think that because we understand it cognitively, it shouldn't be uncomfortable. Yeah. And it's the same with any of these things. It's the same as if we get negative feedback from supervisors, right? You just talked about having major revisions back from your supervisors and things. And we cognitively know they're trying to help us. This is going to make our thesis better, all of those things. But a lot of the time, emotionally, it's like a little, punch in the throat, and it feels awful, and we make it mean stuff and things. And we're like, but, I know it is helping, but it doesn't feel like that. And I don't understand why my brain doesn't match up with my body. And it's because the bit we underestimate is this is also uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To stay in this place where you're not quite sure and you don't know what decision to make and you're figuring it out and you're trying it this way and trying it that way. It's meant to be uncomfortable. Just because you understand that's part of the process doesn't mean that it shouldn't be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that we should just tolerate loads of discomfort, because actually what we end up doing is we make this way more uncomfortable by telling ourselves it shouldn't be like this. And if we were cleverer, we'd just get straight to the thing. Or if we were more disciplined, we'd get this. Or if we'd been better before, we'd have already written this, or it would be in better shape already. We make it infinitely more uncomfortable by layering all this judgment on.
Yeah.
It can just be that sort of uncomfortable you get when you're trying to do like a difficult puzzle. No one does an easy crossword or an easy Wordle or whatever, do they? You do one where it's like, oh, I can't quite work this out, and it's a bit annoying, and then you figure it out. And that kind of uncomfortableness can be okay if you know it's part of it.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what's happening here is you're judging yourself for just experiencing some of this uncomfortableness of not quite having decided what way round or how exactly to argue things.
Yes. I really understand, and I feel like it's also, I have always judged myself too harshly, but it's also like really exactly what you said. Like, I feel like, oh, I have put in, like, okay, I have identified the issue. I have identified that, I have listened to podcasts, I have done this, I have sought help. So now it should be okay because I have put in the work.
I've done all the things. God damn it. It should be easy now.
So now I expect myself to be magically able to just sit down and write because I have done the work, and I know that I shouldn't feel this way. I know that it's meant to be difficult because cognitively I have understood it. I feel like now magically I should be able to go back to this version where I'm like in 1 month I'm done. And because also I'm overwhelmed and tired, so there's this constant, I have to put in work. And there's also like these thoughts that how long do I have to do it? Like it's also because when I identified or accepted that I am where I am, there was also this hope that this process will make it easier. That's why I'm doing it. But I'm still doing it, and it feels like I still have to keep doing the difficult bits. So that's where, like, there are days where I feel like I see myself where I have come a long way from, let's say, last year, where I was completely drowning, but still to see that I have so much more to go, and maybe it won't be the version of the manuscript that I envisioned, or I have to make changes. And so I do understand that it's never like I understood it, I'll go back to the way I was excited about it 4 years ago. I do cognitively, as you said, understand it, but realizing that I still have to keep working on it. So it just becomes like, even let's say taking a break, because I'm overwhelmed and I talk to other people and even supervisors, or let's say even colleagues, and they're, oh, yeah, you have to take a break. And everyone I talk, you have to take a break on the weekend. So taking a break also becomes like a pressure, because then my colleague, like, they meet me on let's next week and like, are you taking a break? And then I become like, oh my God, I didn't take a break. So it becomes like an extra pressure that, oh, now I have to take a break. But when I take a break, I constantly am like spiraling into the things that I still have to do. So it becomes like this, taking care of myself also becomes like another task.
Because you know that's not a break, right?
Yeah.
If you stop working,
Yeah.
but you're still thinking about your work and telling yourself you should be working, and that's just not a break.
Yeah. So I have tried to take a break which you mentioned wasn't a break, and I didn't realize it. And now I have realized that I can't just take a break just to take a break and chill. I have to plan something to do. So I try and plan something that I enjoy, which is outside, whatever. But then now I really make sure in the weekend, let's say I have one activity that I plan that I really want to do. So that also keeps me away from spiraling. And let's say if I want to take like a longer hike in the forest, so I really make sure I plan it on a Saturday. And that means, of course, I'm taking a break, but then I'm also doing something.
Yeah.
Because just in the beginning, when I was planning to take a break and just relax, it just didn't work.
I mean, it can. So one of the things that you can do, and you get to take whatever breaks you think feel rejuvenating for you, because sometimes what we need is actual physical rest. Often what we need is kind of rejuvenation and recuperation. And sometimes that can look like things that are quite energetic or quite social, depending on what you're like and what things kind of replenish you. But the key is, whatever you're doing, you need to decide what you're thinking during that time. Now, that obviously doesn't mean that you're going to be able to just like think exactly what I'm telling myself to think at all times, but you need to have your kind of go-to thoughts that you kind of pre-plan, so that when your brain goes, I shouldn't be in a forest, I should be working, I've got so much to do, how did I think I had time to do this hike, or whatever, or you're just sat on the sofa having time off saying, I shouldn't just be sat here, I should be working, I'm not even doing anything useful. You get to plan in advance how you respond to that voice, because it's completely normal to have this voice. You and everybody who'll be listening to this are super high achieving people. You've probably judged yourself through to lots of really nice high grades over the years and everything. These are very long-standing habits. We're not going to stop your brain saying, oh, you probably should be writing your PhD. It's, it's going to offer that. What we don't have to do is take it so seriously.
Yeah.
And we don't have to just go, oh, you're right, we should. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We get to go, no, it's okay. I know you're worried about your PhD, but remember, we planned this.
Yeah.
This is all part of the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we get to reassure ourselves that this is the plan. Now, the only way you can do that is if you actually intentionally plan that rest. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be an organized activity. You could intentionally plan that this evening at 5 o'clock, you're going to stop work for the evening and you're going to make yourself some lovely food. And then you're going to sit on the sofa and watch terrible television for 2 hours. And when I say terrible, I love terrible television. It's just, you know the kind of telly I mean, like watch Selling Sunset or something for 2 hours and not feel bad about it and have an early night, and it's going to be gorgeous. It can be that, but you intentionally decide, so that you're not sitting there going, once I've watched this episode, I'm going to go and do some work. Oh, well, maybe one more episode. I'll just do one more episode because I don't really feel like it yet. And I'm kind of tired. So maybe I won't do it now, but I will get up earlier than I planned. And You're not doing that. You're going, oh, I love this rubbish television and I love this food. And this is so nice just sat here. And tomorrow I'm going to smash on with my PhD exactly as I planned. But I'm so glad I'm having this evening. It's completely different if you intentionally plan it ahead.
Yeah.
Quick interjection. If you're finding today's session useful, but you're driving or walking the dog or doing the dishes, I want you to do one thing for me after you've finished. Go to my website, phdlifecoach.com, and sign up for my newsletter. We all know that we listen to podcasts and we think, oh, this is really, really useful, I should do that. And then we don't end up doing it. My newsletter is designed specifically to help you make sure you actually use the stuff that you hear here. So every week you'll get a quick summary of the podcast, you'll get some reflective questions, and you'll get one action that you can take immediately to start implementing the things we've talked about. My newsletter community also have access to 1 session a month of online group coaching, which is completely free, but you have to be on the email list to get access. They're also the first to hear when there's spaces on my one-to-one coaching or when there are other programs and workshops that you can get involved with. So after you've listened, or even right now, make sure you go and sign up. How does that feel to kind of, we can think about what thoughts you might have to manage in order to be able to do that, but how does that feel to kind of intentionally look and go, okay, on that evening, on that weekend day, I'm going to intentionally decide that I'm definitely not working, and I'm going to tell myself, reassure myself that that's all part of the plan.
Yeah, that's really different than how I have been functioning. And that's what I said. I do plan it, but then constantly in my head, I already know what I need to do after this thing. Or if even I'm having a dinner with friends, in my head, things are running. So I think it's also like how I have like these habits that have formed where I'm always doing the thing that needs to be done. So one after the other. So also throughout the last 4 years, even though it's also working on the PhD, but it's also like what presentation needs to be made, what in the next meeting I need. So everything has been directed towards what needs to be done. And then it becomes this whole thing like, oh, I have so much work, so I have to be efficient. So it's also, if I'm watching something, what I'm already planning. I felt like I'm quite good at planning, but apparently I wasn't, because I was constantly thinking like, oh yeah, this is the time I'm at my brain is good in the morning, I'll work on this. And at night, maybe I will watch this thing, and on the side, I will do this thing. So I was constantly trying to be more efficient, and it becomes this habit where if I'm watching something, I'm thinking like, maybe I could also get done with something.
Mm-hmm.
And now it becomes such a habit, and I understand it's not the best because I'm constantly trying to like divide my attention, and it becomes like this habit.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I think what you said, like it would be amazing to do this, like really figure out, because I tried to do it. Let's say, for instance, I'm saying, okay, today at 5 o'clock, I will see how far I get. I will stop. Then I will make something. But then, of course, the work spills over. And then I find
No, don't. Let's not just talk about the work as though it's some like sentient being that just like it. Of course, the work spills over. No, let's at least frame that in a way where you take, and I don't mean this in a blame way. This is just in a kind of self-responsibility way. It's not the work spills over. I reach the time where I said I'd stop, and I choose not to stop.
Yeah.
That's what happens. The work doesn't spill over. You make a decision not to honor the time that you said you were going to stop and to keep working. Now, that's fine. If you want to do that, that's absolutely fine. But let's own it, because the work doesn't just magically keep moving.
True. But it's also like immediately there is this kind of guilt that I planned for it. And I should have been done, because when I planned it, and like at that point, it's also the two minds. I know why I wasn't able to finish this part, because something else came up. I had to do, like, this was the part I intended to do, but it opened up this whole other thing. So cognitively, I do understand why I wasn't able to round up and I had to do other things. But there is I chose to do other things, but there is this guilt that comes with it. And then also it links to next day's plan, that I already have to do that. If I keep this, it will affect that plan. So I'm constantly like, my head is like this. I have so many timetables that I have to keep up with. And somehow it's also one of maybe a personality where I just hate being late to things. And it's gets into the work thing. And sometimes it's okay if I have a genuine reason, but I feel like I will make myself crazy trying to just be on time, send the thing on time. So it's like this kind of personality thing, which really in these situations make it very hard.
Yeah.
Because I know I decided that it's 5 o'clock, but it seems like because it's on paper, I can't extend it. So I have a kind of this thing in my head that no matter what happens, I can't. It has to finish by today. So this really spills over very badly in the work, where I'm really putting too much pressure to really get it done, and really in like these very unachievable ways, just so that I'm on time.
Yeah. I don't think the issue then is actually that kind of pressure to get it done on time. I think you need to take a couple of steps back, because I think the challenge here is more that you are allowing these tasks to expand. Okay? Because if you think about it like, I don't know, putting water into a balloon, yeah? You're making water balloons for a fight. And you've decided, I'm going to see where this analogy goes. Who knows? You've decided what size water balloons you're using, i.e. what unit of time you've got. And in theory, you put that much water in that much balloon, and you've got a water balloon. Happy days, ready to throw at whoever. And yours keep bursting. You keep going over time. And saying, oh, I should have got a bigger balloon. I should have got a bigger balloon. I more time. But I think the problem is just that you're pouring all this water in, just way more water than fits. You're deciding, I've got 2 hours to do this piece of work. And partway through it, you're noticing a couple of other references that might be useful or whatever. So you're wandering off to read them and to check that out, or to actually, if I'm changing this bit, I need to go back and change all those things too. And you're doing that now in this time slot that was originally allocated for the initial task. And then you're wondering why it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fit because you're doing more than you said you were going to.
Yeah.
Or to a standard that's greater than fits in the time. Or a level of thoroughness that then fits in the time. I might have mentioned this on a previous podcast, but I think it's a really, really useful one. There's a coach that I really like called Karen Nordine. And she said that the amount of time you have to do a task is the parameter by which you decide how you're going to do it. Okay. Usually we have a fixed scope of a project in our head, or a fixed quality of a scope of a project in our head, and then we see how long it takes us to do it. Where in reality, how well you do it or what it looks like is entirely dependent on how much time you give it.
Yeah.
And if we want to have control over how long things take, we need to decide how long they take. And then do it to the quality you can do it in that time. And sometimes that means doing it a bit rougher, but often it definitely means not going off on tangents. Making a little note of the tangent for another day, perhaps, but not just going, oh, and I'll just check that now, and then wondering why it doesn't fit at the end of the session.
Yeah, that does make sense, because I do understand, and I do realize, and that also causes some of the frustration when I'm making a plan that, I don't know how much it will take. I will, and that's why all my future plans, I'll just put a rough number, because from the past plans, I have never been able to stick to it, because I have went on tangents, and I think like, okay, this was what was important. I had to do it, but then it also means that I can't make a precise plan, which really frustrates me more, that, now I can't even make a plan. So it's really becomes, then I'm like, so first I was at least not sticking to a plan. Now I can't even make a proper plan.
Yeah.
So it then becomes
and then we either don't plan or we plan in a really flippant, like, oh, I'll do this, then this, then this, whatever, because I never stick to it anyway. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. So normal. What we want to try and do is we want to try and plan a plan that feels doable, like at the easy end of doable. Like, yeah, you know, I can definitely do this. And then we need to try and make as much of that happen as we can. Now, no one ever sticks to plans perfect. I mean, some robots do. I never stick to plans perfectly, but having them, in fact, the podcast, by the time this one comes out, it'll have been a little while ago, but the podcast that came out today was about imperfect planning.
Yeah.
So do definitely check that one out. So it's trying to remember in that moment when your brain goes, oh, I just need to have a system where you can say, no, that's a job for another hour. I'll put it over there. My job is this bit. And we do that bit to the best of our ability without the other thing we need to check. Yeah. And it might mean you need to put add reference or a little, you know, a little note saying, make sure this is actually true later or whatever. Another episode that might be useful if you haven't listened to it is the one about why you shouldn't read when you're writing. Like during writing sessions. So you make a note for yourself of what you need to go check rather than going off to read during a writing session, because that's how we get off track.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, yeah, it becomes all of these different things. It just comes at the point where I'm actually doing the work. And as I said, like really makes me less enthusiastic about the work. And I understand like if maybe I also have to go back to these one by one because there is a lot of things happening, but then it becomes really overwhelming because constantly I'm thinking, yeah, but this is time I'm not spending on the PhD. But I know it will help me in working.
What sorts of things do you mean when you're saying I need to go and do those things? What sorts of things do you mean?
Like, for instance, with the planning thing, because my head is like, there are 1,000 different things coming. Like, let's say now, for example, after this, I try and plan tomorrow. So I would make a plan. I would be like, okay, I have to do this. So I want to spend a little more time to really understand what I have to do. And because earlier that was also one of the issue where I was just make a quick plan because I don't want to waste time in planning, but I want to actually do the work. Mm-hmm. And now I would really try and understand how much work I have to do and really see, okay, then this means this is where I'll take a break and this. So it takes me longer to plan now, which I think is useful. But in my head, constantly I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm spending so much time in making the plan. It will not work out. So it's really like these silencing different thoughts.
Yeah. Only you know, with the planning, for some people, planning can be procrastination. So sometimes people are like, you know, as long as if I had a perfect plan, then all this would just work. And people can spend too much time in planning. Other people just avoid planning entirely and would actually benefit from some. So sort of it does vary a little bit from person to person. What I would say always, if you're in the midst of overwhelm, that's not when to plan. So if you're in a massive overwhelmed thing, I would just pick a chunk of work that definitely needs doing. So not silly, we're not talking references, we're not talking typos, like a chunk of work that you know needs rewriting or something, where you know roughly what needs to be said, but you haven't done it yet. And just do one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're in the midst, oh my God, I've got 1,000 things, I've got, our head's going like this, it's spinning, just all these things. This one, I'm just doing this one. Yeah. And as long as it is an important task, it doesn't matter if it's the most important task, as long as it's not silly little organizational tasks. Yeah. Because that sense of just going, I've got 1,000 things to do, but this is the one I'm doing, allows you to start that one thing. And every time your brain's going, but there's these other things, it's like, yeah, there are, but we're doing this one. We're doing this one. And you just pull yourself back. If you can get an hour or 2 hours into one thing that definitely needed to move forwards, it can just start helping with that kind of sense of calm.
Yeah.
And then once we've made a bit of progress on one thing, we're in a much better frame of mind to then be like, okay, I need to sort out tomorrow. So for example, after this, I wouldn't go plan after this. I would pick one thing and make an hour or so's progress on it, and then plan after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's exactly like my main planning is when I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That's always
And then you make
yeah.
overwhelmed
Yeah.
people make overwhelming plans.
And then also the plans are quite unrealistic because I'm overwhelmed. So I already know the 10 different things and I need to
and you're trying to
fit
put
everything.
all of them in a way that you know doesn't fit, but if it looks like it does, it'll be fine for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we just pick a thing.
True. But
what I want you to think about through this time is I want you to imagine that you are an athlete going into a heavy season. Yeah. So you are coming up to the Olympics, you're coming up to like the busiest part of the football season, whatever sport resonates with you. And they have got lots to do. Yeah, they've got all these matches, these races, whatever. They've got the training in between. So they've got lots to do. And what that means is they've got people around them. Often we have to now do this for ourselves because we're not elite athletes, but they've got people around them whose jobs are supporting them through that. Yeah. And creating an environment around them that means they're ready to do that heavy period of training and performance. Okay. So if we sort of lift ourselves for a second into you being your own boss, what sort of environment do you want to create around yourself if you were your employee? What kind of environment do you want to create around you that's going to make this heavy period easier for you?
I think really creating like these periods where there are no distractions, where I can really focus on writing and thinking critically, like really, I don't have to do anything and no emails, nothing.
Yeah.
And I really have a space, preferably in my home rather than in the office because other people can drop by.
Yeah.
So really having these chunks of really focused work I can get done, which gives me the confidence that I'm making progress, but also at other points, really have some kind of, I don't know, activity, something that gives me energy because I would, during these very focused, I would be drained from really working hard. So, and preferably some activity which is not related to the PhD, which means that I'm not thinking about it. And when I come back, I get a fresh perspective on things. But then also some kind of activity, which is something I have let go over the years because I used to do a lot of other things that I used to enjoy and I was good at. But because as the PhD progressed, it began to take up a lot of my time. And I shifted countries. So that also meant, a change of environment and I wanted to fit in. So I have given up a lot of these activities, but I feel like in between having those activities would really give me the energy, distract myself from these hard things so that when I come back, I really look forward to coming back. Because now with these extended period is happening, what I said that I don't look forward to it in the morning to come back to the PhD because I'm constantly draining myself and it becomes this whole, I'm working on something, it's not getting over, I'm not able to do it. So I'm constantly doing the same thing.
Yeah. So what would you want to say? So you've talked about having periods of no distraction in an environment where you won't get disturbed. You've talked about having energizing activities that are nothing to do with your PhD. What sorts of things would you be saying to your employee as they go into this type of a phase?
You mean when I go to the phase when I'm working on the PhD?
Through this whole, so you've got this like 4 or 5 month heavy performance environment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it was an athlete, it's coming up to this really heavy training period. For you, it's this like thesis writing period. And I think thinking about it in analogy can really help. So thinking about it as, what would you say to an athlete? So they've got match after match after match, training session after training session after training session. It's going to be tiring. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be a lot of pressure. What would you say to them to help kind of as they go along? What sorts of things might you say?
Well, I think something which I'm reminding myself also, the motivation I have, I
It's
had
why
of
you want to do
going
it.
do
Yeah.
it. And also as things are getting difficult and I feel like, oh, for how long do I have to keep doing it? Something that one of my colleagues told me, and it's really, I'm thinking, is they really said that this is maybe the last chance that you would have in your life to do something that you made up entirely, whether you are in an academic, later on you
Yeah.
go to industry. It would probably be the first and last time where you decided to do something and you get the opportunity to go into the depth and make up stuff and do things the way you want. And PhD is probably the one and only chance, which is actually helping me now, like since the last few days that I've started looking at like that. So where I'm, rather than trying to finish it and pushing it to finish it, I'm thinking like, somehow when you feel like something is going to end, it gives you like this almost a kind of nostalgic thing that, yeah, I'll miss this. So I think for me, that is really helping.
Yeah.
And I'm
There's a
trying to do
technique
it.
called savoring,
Okay.
which is where you really consciously notice. It's almost like sort of gratitude in the moment, where you kind, if you were eating something amazing that you've only got one of or whatever, and you just like savor every bite of it. You can do that with anything. People often talk about it in the context of babies. Babies are such hard work, they're exhausting, it can feel endless, all of these things. But one of the things that can help with that is really savoring those moments of cuddles and sniffing them and all that stuff, and remembering that one day you'll miss this. Even though it feels utterly relentless at the moment, one day you'll miss having that little baby in your arms. And I think the same is true with your PhD, that you can savor these quiet moments. And you can't expect to feel like this all the time, don't get me wrong. It's still going to be bits where it's just hard, but taking moments every now and again to be like, what a privilege. What a privilege to be sat at this desk writing about stuff I made up, that I care about, that some experts are going to give me their opinion on, and I get to talk with them about it. This is amazing. And you created it, right? You brought yourself. That's the other thing you can remind yourself in all of this, is you are in a period now that you dreamt of. When you were applying for your PhD and when you were getting it started, you've done your field work. You're writing your thesis. This is literally where you wanted to be. And just that kind of reminding yourself that you're living past you's dream right now. This is exactly what they wanted to be doing. And future you will look back on this with nostalgia and be like, oh, that was so nice. I wish I could do that again. Yeah. And you can like actively try and create those things to remind yourself of that stuff.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much easier to bear. It's like, yeah, it's hard at the moment.
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at what I'm doing.
True. And also I feel like you said it, like it's supposed to be hard. Like at the moment that I'm doing it, and there are moments where I'm trying to solve something, like this belief that, yeah, but I'm a smart person, I should be able to do it. But I think like what would help, which I'm also struggling, is really telling myself, as you said, it's supposed to be hard. You are making up new knowledge. It's supposed to take time, and not getting caught up in the being efficient and planning, and really trying to put it more in practice. And I think it starts with what you said, like what would you say at that moment? And that is what I'm struggling, because at that moment, although I understand it, at that moment I don't say anything like that, so I would get overwhelmed. But really at that moment, saying to myself that, okay, it's it's hard, but it's supposed to be hard. And you have done hard things.
I
And
love that. You've done hard things.
yeah,
You're gonna figure this out.
there are evidence of it. Sometimes I don't believe it, I can do it, but I have done harder things. I have moved countries. So this is something I can do it. And also, if I can't do it, it's okay. It's just a small part of the other things. I will do other things. So I really need to remind myself at that moment to tell myself these things.
Yeah.
Because when I sit back and think about it, I do remember it. But at that moment of overwhelm, I'm just too hard on myself.
Yeah. And it's so common. And when we're saying it's meant to be hard, I just want to be really clear for you and for everybody else. When we say it's going to be hard, it means it's meant to be difficult. You're meant to grapple with these things. You're meant to be unsure. It's not meant to be deeply unpleasant and beating ourselves up and being horrible and all of those. It doesn't have to be any of those things. So when we're saying it's meant to be hard, it's not you're meant to be dreading it, suck it up and get on with it. It's like, no, it's meant to be challenging. One of the things I quite like online, you can often find stuff that like past geniuses have written. So people that have written like classic novels or philosophers of old or whatever, and they're talking about like wrestling with key ideas and that they just can't figure this solution out and whatever. And you can just imagine yourself like being like one of them. You're like somebody who's trying to work out Fibonacci sequence or whatever it is for the first time. I'm like, I can't make this work. I don't understand. And that sort of staying with it and being like, this is so annoying. I can't decide whether to write in this direction or that direction, but I'm going to work this out, is such a different vibe than this is awful, I must be stupid, I'm never going to do it. It's totally different than wrestling with it.
Yeah, I think like, as you said, like separating it, for me at least, now that you are talking, like separating the two things, that first, it is a difficult thing, but then the dread for me is coming out of what I make out of it. The dread is coming out of, I'm not dreading the work. That's why I was, for the longest time, very confused that why am I dreading to go back to the PhD that I love, I have made up, I am here because I decided. But the dread was more because I made it about me, about I'm not good enough, I am never gonna finish it, my supervisors are gonna hate me, everyone that over the years thought I was good enough now would suddenly be, it's also linked to the imposter syndrome. But I still want to work on the work. I still want to complete it because I think it's amazing the way it has turned out. But I think separating the two things, where the dread is coming from is not from the work itself. So even like subconsciously, I know that even if I can't, let's say, figure out this particular problem, okay, this is a hard thing, I want to do it. Worst case scenario, I won't solve this problem in this PhD. I'm okay with it. I have done other things. I will put my stress on other things that I have done well. And this is something, maybe I'll have comments. I'll try to do it then. But I'm okay with not being able to solve each and every problem. But the dread is not out of not being able to do it. The dread is out of what I make it about me. And I think separating 100%. That, like as you are saying now, I think it helps me, and I think I should remind myself to do it.
Yeah. Because when you're trying to solve something, if you can't solve it, you can talk about ways that you might be able to solve it in the future as well, right? So if there's bits of your thesis that you're like, I just don't even know how to do this bit, you can talk about those in limitations. You can also talk about them in future directions, right? You can say, I don't think my data actually enables us to solve this problem, but you can speculate about what might in the future. And if you haven't made it mean something about you that you're finding this difficult, it's so much easier to then be kind of curious and be like, I don't think we can solve this from the data that I don't think this is something that, this isn't me. This is, I think this is actually outside the scope of my thesis, in which case we either don't talk about it, or we talk about the fact that we haven't got the right stuff and that actually maybe we need access to that field site, or we need access to these people or that type of data or whatever it is. But that kind of curious openness comes when we know it doesn't mean anything about us that we're finding this difficult, that this is just a difficult thing, and that's okay.
Yes. I feel like, yeah, there are certain things. It's also, I feel, the way I have been working. So it's also out of habit. I do a lot of things. And now that I'm kind of dissecting it and I'm understanding, I do understand. And I do also understand that why I'm finding it difficult has a lot to do with these very unnecessary thing, which is actually not helping me. So if I am saying I want to do a good PhD and I want to do it within this time, all of these other things are basically just wasting my time, because I'm just getting caught up in it, and eventually I am not going in the direction that I wanted to go. So it's also reminding myself that maybe it's okay. Maybe if I won't be able to solve these things, maybe the PhD won't be as good. So it's all of these other things which are kind of wasting my time basically, but I'm not able to like get away with it. And it's kind of this circle. And if I can just think alternatively, yeah, those things are there. Yeah. But then let's focus on this, which is actually helping me in the direction that I actually want to go.
Because some of those things are unknowable at the moment, right? How long it's going to take you to finish, whether you're going to solve all the things that you want to solve. They're not knowable right now. And a lot of the pain, I think, is coming from wanting to know that you can definitely do those things. If we take it back to the sports analogy, right? If you think about you as a footballer, for example, you've got a whole load of matches this season. And if you're going, I don't know if I'm going to win the league. I just don't know if I'm going to win the league. But what if I don't win the league? Then if you're in that mode all the time, it makes it incredibly hard to do your training. And if when you're turning up to play Arsenal, you're thinking, but next week I need to play Chelsea, and the week after that I'm playing Manchester United, and I mean, I don't even know what I'm going to do then, then you're not thinking about your Arsenal game, right? And I think we do that with our PhDs. We're like, oh yeah, but I'm going to have that bit, and then there'll be this bit, and there's that bit, and it's relentless. It's like, but we're not doing it all at once. We're just doing this bit now. And that's where the planning intentionally can be really useful, because then when your brain goes, but we've got to do this bit, and it's like, yeah, I know. That's December me's problem. November me's problem's this section. This is the only bit. Yeah, I've got 4 months of this. That's fine. I'm going to look after myself. But right now, it's just this bit. And today, it's just this little bit. It's not even this whole section. My job for today, write 3 paragraphs on this, read that article to find out this. Let's go. I can do that. And then your brain goes, yeah, but if you don't get that done, what about everything? So it's okay. We're just going to get this bit done. Don't need to worry about the rest of it right now. And that's where often when people start to have coaching, start to think about this stuff, they think that stuff will happen automatically, that, you know, you'll come to a coaching session, you'll realize, oh, it's my thoughts. Right. Okay. I just won't have those thoughts anymore. You will. You're going to have all of these thoughts, and that's completely normal too. But you just get better at noticing them, going, yeah, I know. It's okay. You're freaking out about that. It's fine. We don't need to think about that. We don't need to know if we're going to do this on time. What we need to know is what today's task is. And we do today's task. Let's just keep doing that, and we're going to be fine. Not worried about all that, but we're going to be fine. And we generate that kind of very pragmatic, very kind self-talk, where it's like, we know this bit, so we do this bit. The rest is for another day's me, and we'll get there too.
I think that's the hardest for me. Like, also this lack of control over just letting it, even though I leave it, I have to plan it. You know, even if I'm like, okay, today I'm not going to do this, but in my head, I need to know when I'm going to do this. Otherwise, somehow it will go away. So this lack of control, when it's over this extended period of time, where there is this, I'm not able to control the end, when or how, and that constantly plays in the mind, and it kind of hinders the day-to-day, my ability to do day-to-day things properly.
So you lose control now.
Yeah.
And that's the bit I want you to remember and to remind your brain.
Yeah.
Is every time your brain is going, but I need to know when we're going to do that chapter, because otherwise I'm not in control. You need to remind your brain, by trying to be in control of the whole 4 months, I'm not in control of the next hour.
Yeah.
As long as I'm in control of the next hour, I'm fine. And yeah, there'll be times when we step back and we do that planning, and we have to have faith in that bit. This is why I quite often talk about separating boss you from implementer you, and only spending some time in boss mode, because boss mode is the version of you that needs to have an approximate plan of, I'm going to focus on this stuff in month 1, this stuff in month 2. You're just very notional kind of rough plan. Implementer you just needs to do what she's damn told on the day she's told to do it. And she doesn't need to, it's almost like not your job, not your pay grade, implementer. Boss is going to think about that. Boss will think about that next Monday when we're planning again. Right now, your only job is write bullet points on this page and do the edits that my supervisor said on those 2 pages or whatever. And you have to actively talk back to yourself. Yeah, I know you're worried about that. We're going to look at that when we're planning. Right now, this is our job. We're in control of, if that notion of control resonates with you, then use it. We're in control of what we're doing now. And what we're doing now is this task.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like constantly reminding myself, as you said, because at some point it also felt like, I won't say failure, but also like, why do I have to keep reminding myself? Like, I'm also judging myself.
Because we're human beings and we all are going to have to manage this actively forever.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because we get better at it, right? And we make it less of a big deal if we don't. I have my little meltdowns about things, 100%. But they're less intense than they used to be. They happen less often than they used to be, and they don't last as long. And I know how they just don't feel as dramatic, because you know how to get yourself out of it. It's like there are people who've got like chronic health conditions and stuff, and so you get a really bad headache or something, but you have migraines, and so it's like, okay, this is not my favorite thing in the world, but I know how to look after myself. I know what it is. Whereas somebody who has that for the first time might be like, oh my God, there's something terrible happening here. This is awful. Whereas like, no, it's fine. This is just what happens. We can get like that with our own like overwhelm and stuff. I am much more now like, yeah, I'm overwhelmed. I know I'm overwhelmed. I know what happens when I'm overwhelmed. I know what goes wrong. I can't make this go away, but I do know what things help. And so I kind of recognize it much less dramatically, and can I'm perfect. I spend some time wallowing in it, but I'm much quicker and more skilled at going like, okay, yeah, you're all overwhelmed because you've been telling yourself this, this, and this. It's fine. We're just going to do this next thing. We'll do this thing. It's fine. And kind of, you get to learn to look after yourself. And that's why with all the work that I do, having things like the membership and the regular community coaching and stuff that you can come to keep reinforcing this stuff becomes so helpful, because it isn't the sort of thing that you can just have a one-off workshop and suddenly you've changed the way you think. And if you think that's going to happen, then you start beating yourself up about that, right? You're like, I know these thoughts are stupid and I'm still having them. This is so silly. It's human. Yeah. It's just human. It's completely normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really hope that was useful.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. It was also nice to actually talk certain things, because many times I know these things, but talking it out, you really focus on specific things. So it was very helpful for me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the PhD Life Coach podcast. If you like this episode, please tell your friends, your colleagues, and your universities. I'd appreciate it if you took the time to leave a review, give me stars, stickers, and all that general approval as well. If you'd like to find out more about working with me, either for yourself or for people at your university, please check out my website at thephdlifecoach.com. You can also sign up to hear more about my free group coaching sessions for PhD students and academics. See you next time.